I thought spilling a caramel macchiato on a billionaire's custom suit would be the most terrifying moment of my life, but that was before her crying toddler latched onto my apron and screamed, "Mommy!" Welcome to the channel. If you are ready for an intense, heart-fluttering romance filled with unexpected twists and an icy CEO who always gets what she wants, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps bring more of these stories to life. Now let's dive right into the story. Part 1: The Storm and the Stranger. The bell above the door of the Daily Grind chimed, a cheerful little sound that entirely contradicted the absolute downpour happening outside. My name is Emma, and for the last 3 years this small, brick-walled cafe in the heart of downtown Seattle has been my entire world. I poured my heart, my soul, and every last penny of my savings into this place. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was mine. The aroma of freshly roasted espresso beans, melting dark chocolate, and warm vanilla was permanently woven into my clothes, a comforting perfume that made me feel grounded even on the most chaotic days. And today was undeniably chaotic. The rain was coming down in sheets, driving a massive rush of office workers into my little shop seeking refuge and caffeine. The espresso machine was hissing like an angry dragon, and I was moving at the speed of light, pulling shots, frothing milk, and calling out names with a practiced customer service smile. "Venti iced Americano for David," I called out, wiping a stray strand of chestnut hair from my forehead with the back of my wrist. Just as I handed the icy beverage over the counter, the front door flew open with such force that it slammed against the wall. The sudden noise made several patrons jump, and I instinctively looked up, expecting to see a frustrated commuter fighting with a broken umbrella. Instead, a tiny blur of motion darted through the legs of the waiting customers. Before I could even process what was happening, a little girl, no older than 4, slipped behind the counter. She was wearing a ridiculously expensive-looking trench coat that was drenched in rainwater, her tiny black boots squeaking loudly against the linoleum floor. Her dark hair was plastered to her cheeks, and her chest heaved with frantic, heavy sobs. "Hey, sweetheart, you can't be back here," I started to say, crouching down and keeping my voice soft so I wouldn't frighten her further. "Where are your parents?" The little girl didn't answer. Instead, her wide, tear-filled, stormy gray eyes locked onto mine. A look of profound, absolute relief washed over her tiny features. She lunged forward, throwing her little arms around my waist and burying her wet face directly into the fabric of my apron. "Mommy," she wailed, her voice cracking with raw, heartbreaking desperation. "Mommy, mommy, mommy." I froze completely. The bustling noise of the cafe seemed to instantly fade into a dead silence. The rhythmic hissing of the espresso machine faded into the background. Dozens of eyes were suddenly boring into me, the customers pausing their conversations to stare at the bizarre scene unfolding behind the pastry case. "Oh no, honey," I whispered, gently resting my hands on her trembling shoulders. "I'm not your mommy. You're confused, sweetie. Did you lose your family outside?" "No." "Mommy," she cried louder, her little fingers twisting into the fabric of my apron with a grip so tight her knuckles turned white. She pressed her face harder against my stomach, refusing to let go, trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. My heart broke for her. Whoever this child belonged to, she was terrified out of her mind. I knelt all the way down to the floor, ignoring the dampness seeping into my jeans from her wet coat. I wrapped my arms around her, gently rubbing her back in soothing, rhythmic circles. "Sure, it's okay," I murmured, rocking her slightly. "You're safe here. I've got you. We'll find your family, okay? I promise." The moment those words left my mouth, the atmosphere in the cafe shifted. The air grew suddenly thick, heavy, and undeniably cold. The low murmurs of the customers died out completely, replaced by an oppressive, tense silence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I looked toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway was a woman who commanded the room simply by existing. She was tall, impossibly tall, and dressed in a tailored charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my cafe's annual rent. a sleek black trench coat draped over her shoulders, shedding water droplets onto the floor mat. Her dark obsidian hair was pulled back into a severe, flawless chignon, and her sharp, angular features looked as though they had been sculpted from marble. But it was her eyes that made my breath catch in my throat. They were the exact same stormy, piercing gray as the little girl clinging to my chest. However, where the child's eyes were filled with fear, the woman's eyes were filled with a glacial, terrifying authority. This was Harper Hayes, the CEO of Hayes International. She was known across the country as a ruthless, untouchable alpha in the corporate world, a woman who devoured rival companies for breakfast and never ever took no for an answer. And right now, those terrifying gray eyes were locked dead onto me. Behind her, two massive men in dark suits stepped into the cafe, their expressions identical stone masks. Bodyguards. Lily, Harper's voice sliced through the silence. It was low, smooth, and dangerously calm. It wasn't a yell, yet it resonated with an alpha's commanding frequency that demanded immediate obedience. The little girl in my arms flinched violently. Instead of running toward the woman, she let out a muffled whimper and squeezed her eyes shut, burrowing her face deeper into my neck. "No," Lily whispered against my skin. "Want mommy." Harper stepped forward, the sharp click of her heels against the wooden floorboards echoing loudly. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea, people practically flattening themselves against the tables to avoid being in her path. She stopped exactly 3 feet away from me, her towering presence casting a long shadow over us. Close, the scent of her hit me, a heady, intoxicating mix of sharp cedar, petrichor, and expensive bergamot. It was overwhelming, a scent designed to dominate and intimidate. I felt a strange, involuntary shiver run down my spine, my body reacting to her sheer alpha energy before my brain could stop it. "Let go of my daughter," Harper ordered, her voice dropping an octave, carrying a subtle, dangerous growl. I bristled. I was naturally a peaceful person, an Omega who avoided conflict, but something about her tone, the sheer arrogance and coldness of it, ignited a sudden spark of defiance in my chest. "I am not holding her hostage," I replied, my voice steady despite the rapid pounding of my heart. I kept my arms protectively around the trembling toddler. She ran in here terrified and grabbed me. "If you want her to let go, maybe you should try comforting her instead of barking orders like a drill sergeant." A collective gasp echoed from the nearest table. One of the bodyguards tensed, stepping forward, but Harper held up a single black-gloved hand, stopping him in his tracks. Harper tilted her head, her piercing eyes narrowing as she truly looked at me for the first time. Her gaze dragged slowly from my messy, flour-dusted apron to my defiant, flushed face. I felt stripped bare under her intense scrutiny, my breath hitching in my throat. "Lily," Harper said again, crouching down so she was at eye level with us. Her tone softened a fraction, but it still lacked the warmth a mother should have. "Come here. Now. You are causing a scene." Lily peeked out from my neck, tears streaming down her chubby cheeks. "No. I want this, Mommy. She smells like cookies and warm. You're always cold." Harper froze. For a split second, the impenetrable mask of the ruthless CEO cracked, revealing a flash of something vulnerable, guilt, pain, shock, before it vanished behind her icy exterior once more. She looked from her daughter, who was clinging to me as if her life depended on it, back to me. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken tension. I could see the gears turning in Harper's brilliant, calculating mind. She was not a woman used to losing control, especially not over her own child. "I will compensate you for your time and the disruption to your business," Harper stated, rising to her full, imposing height. She reached into her blazer, pulling out a sleek black checkbook. "Name your price." I stared at her, utterly bewildered. "Excuse me? Name my price? What are you talking about?" "For the child," Harper said matter-of-factly, as if we were discussing a corporate merger. "She is clearly fixated on you, and I have a board meeting in exactly 45 minutes that I cannot miss. I do not have the time or the patience for a tantrum today." You can't be serious, I scoffed, my temper finally flaring. You're trying to pay me to babysit your daughter because she called me mommy by accident? She needs you. She's scared. Harper stepped closer, entirely ignoring my lecture. She leaned down, invading my personal space. The scent of cedar and bergamot wrapped around me, dizzying and potent. Her lips were mere inches from my ear, her voice dropping to a husky, commanding whisper that sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. I am entirely serious, Emma, she murmured, reading my name off the small wooden tag pinned to my apron. My daughter has never attached herself to anyone like this. You have exactly two choices. Either you pry her off of you and deal with the screaming fit that follows, or you gather your things, get in my car, and come home with us. I looked up, my eyes wide, colliding with her stormy gray gaze. You're out of your mind, I breathed. A slow, dangerous smirk tugged at the corner of Harper's perfectly painted lips. Perhaps, Harper whispered smoothly. But I always get what I want. And right now, it seems my daughter wants you. End of part 1. Part 2, The Billionaire's Ultimatum. The absolute audacity of her statement hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I always get what I want. The words echoed in my mind, sending a volatile mixture of anger and a strange, unbidden shiver of heat down my spine. I stared into Harper Hayes' stormy gray eyes, refusing to be the first one to look away. I have a business to run, I said, my voice trembling slightly, betraying the fierce facade I was trying to maintain. I have customers waiting. I can't just abandon my cafe to play nanny for a billionaire who doesn't know how to handle her own child. Harper didn't even blink at my insult. Her flawless expression remained a terrifying mask of calm calculation. She simply straightened her posture, the expensive fabric of her charcoal suit pulling taut across her broad shoulders. She snapped her fingers, a sharp, crisp sound that cut through the ambient noise of the stunned cafe. Instantly, one of the massive bodyguards stepped forward. He bypassed me completely, walking straight to the cash register where my barista, Chloe, was standing frozen like a deer in headlights. "What are you doing?" I demanded, trying to stand up, but Lily whimpered and tightened her grip around my neck, burying her face into my collarbone. "Buying your time," Harper said smoothly. The bodyguard pulled out a sleek, heavy black card and placed it on the counter. "Charge $50,000 to this account," he instructed Chloe in a deep, monotone voice. "Then lock the doors. The daily grind is closed for the remainder of the week." Chloe's jaw practically hit the floor. "50,000?" she stammered, her eyes darting between the black card, the giant bodyguard, and me. "You can't do that," I yelled, my protective instincts flaring up. "You can't just buy my life." "I just did," Harper replied, checking a diamond-encrusted watch on her wrist. The sheer indifference in her tone made my blood boil. "You have exactly 1 minute to grab your coat, Emma. If you refuse, I will simply have my men physically detach my daughter from you. Given her current state of distress, I imagine that will be a highly traumatic experience for her. The choice is yours." It was a checkmate. She knew exactly what she was doing. Harper had recognized my soft spot for the trembling toddler in my arms and ruthlessly weaponized it. I looked down at Lily. The little girl was still shaking, her breathing shallow and ragged from crying. Her tiny fingers were locked into my apron strings like a lifeline. If those massive men ripped her away from me, she would be completely hysterical. I glared at Harper, pouring every ounce of my frustration into the look. "You are unbelievable." "I am efficient," Harper corrected coolly. 45 seconds. "Emma, just go." Chloe hissed from the counter, already swiping the black card with a frantic, terrified energy. "I've got the shop. Seriously, please just do what she says. That's Harper Hayes. She could literally buy this entire city block and bulldoze it if she wanted to." I let out a defeated breath, the fight draining out of me as I realized the absolute absurdity of my situation. I was a simple, small business owner, an Omega who lived a quiet, predictable life. Now, I was being essentially kidnapped by the most powerful alpha in Seattle because her toddler liked how I smelled. Fine, I gritted out. But I'm doing this for her, not for you. Harper's lips twitched, not quite forming a smile, but something close to amusement danced in her icy eyes. Noted. I didn't bother taking off my apron. I just awkwardly maneuvered one arm out from under Lily to grab my worn denim jacket off the hook behind the counter. I draped it over the little girl's shoulders to offer her some extra warmth. The moment I stepped out from behind the counter, Harper's bodyguards moved into formation, flanking us. Harper led the way out of the cafe. As she opened the door, the bell chimed again, a mocking, cheerful sound. One of the guards instantly popped open a massive black umbrella, holding it over Harper and me as we stepped out into the pouring Seattle rain. Waiting at the curb was a fleet of 3 black armored SUVs, their engines purring with a low, intimidating hum. The guard opened the rear door of the middle vehicle, and Harper gestured for me to get in. I climbed inside, awkwardly maneuvering with Lily still securely plastered to my chest. The interior of the SUV was unlike anything I had ever seen. It felt more like a private jet than a car. Soft, cream-colored leather seats faced each other, separated by a glossy wooden console. The windows were heavily tinted, shutting out the dreary gray world outside and encasing us in a private, dimly lit sanctuary. Harper slid in gracefully, sitting opposite me. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing us in. The sound of the torrential rain instantly vanished, replaced by an absolute profound silence. As the SUV pulled smoothly into the chaotic downtown traffic, the reality of the confined space hit me. The air inside the cabin was saturated with Harper's scent. It was a classic, overwhelming alpha pheromone profile: sharp cedar, rain-soaked earth, and that distinct, expensive bergamot. It was aggressive and dominant, wrapping around me and making my omega instincts flare with a confusing mix of anxiety and a deep, involuntary hum of submission. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, trying to focus my attention entirely on the child in my arms. Lily had finally stopped crying. The rhythmic motion of the luxurious vehicle and the warmth of my body had lulled her into a state of exhaustion. Her eyes were closed, her long dark lashes resting against her flushed cheeks. She breathed softly against my neck, smelling of rain and baby shampoo. "She has never done anything like this," Harper said suddenly, breaking the heavy silence. I looked up. Harper wasn't looking at me, her gaze was fixed on her daughter. For a fleeting second, the cold, corporate armor slipped, and she just looked like a tired mother trying to decipher a puzzle she didn't have the instructions for. "Children need comfort," I said softly, keeping my voice low so as not to wake the sleeping toddler. "They don't care about board meetings or money or efficiency. When they are scared, they just want to feel safe." Harper's gray eyes slowly moved from Lily to me. Her gaze was intense, analytical, as if she were dissecting my words to find the hidden variables. "I provide her with everything she could possibly need," Harper stated, her tone defensive but clipped. "She has the best nannies, the best security, the best education." "Nannies and security guards aren't a mother," I replied, the words slipping out before my brain could filter them. The air in the car instantly dropped 10 degrees. The oppressive weight of Harper's alpha presence flared, heavy and warning. Her jaw tightened, the muscles ticking beneath her flawless skin. "You are stepping over a line, Emma," she warned, her voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated in my chest. "You know nothing about my life or how I raise my daughter. You are here to provide temporary pacification. Do not mistake this transaction for an invitation to critique my parenting." I bit the inside of my cheek, forcing myself to look away. She was right. I was a stranger. But the way Lily had clung to me, a complete unknown, spoke volumes about the emotional void the child was experiencing. The rest of the ride passed in a suffocating, tense silence. I watched the city skyline fade into the wealthy, sprawling suburbs of Mercer Island. Massive gates, towering hedges, and winding private driveways replaced the concrete jungle. Eventually, the SUV slowed, turning down a private, tree-lined road. the end of it stood the Hayes estate. Calling it a house would be a severe understatement. It was a modern architectural fortress of steel, glass, and dark stone, perched on a cliff overlooking the turbulent gray waters of Lake Washington. It was beautiful but cold, just like its owner. Convoy stopped under a massive porte-cochere. Instantly, the doors were opened by waiting staff. Harper stepped out first, adjusting her suit jacket. She turned back to look at me, her expression completely unreadable. "Bring her inside," Harper commanded. I carefully unbuckled myself, carrying the sleeping Lily in my arms, and stepped out into the crisp, cold air. We walked through immense glass doors into a foyer that looked like a modern art museum. High ceilings, minimalist furniture, and a sweeping staircase of glass and steel dominated the space. It felt entirely devoid of warmth, devoid of life. It was no place for a child to grow up. A woman in a crisp uniform rushed forward, her face pale with worry. "Ms. Hayes." "Oh, thank goodness." I turned my back for 1 second in the park, and she just vanished into the crowd. "I am so terribly sorry." "You're fired, Maria," Harper interrupted, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Pack your things and leave the premises within the hour. My assistant will wire your final severance." The nanny gasped, tears instantly springing to her eyes, but she knew better than to argue with Harper Hayes. She nodded weakly and hurried away. I stared at Harper, appalled. She made a mistake. You didn't even listen to her. A mistake that could have cost my daughter her life, Harper countered fiercely, stepping directly into my space. Her height and her overwhelming scent forced me to look up, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I do not tolerate incompetence, Emma. In my business or in my home." Harper looked down at Lily, who was still deeply asleep against my shoulder, and then her piercing gray eyes locked onto mine. The intensity in her gaze made my breath hitch. "Which brings us to your new employment contract," Harper murmured, her voice dangerously soft, echoing slightly in the massive, empty foyer. "My what?" I asked, my grip tightening on Lily. "You said you were buying my time for the week. I'm here to calm her down, and then I'm going back to my cafe." A dark, possessive smirk slowly curled the corners of Harper's lips. The sheer, terrifying dominance of an apex alpha radiated from her, freezing me in place. "Plans have changed," Harper whispered, stepping so close I could feel the heat radiating from her suit. "My daughter has chosen you. Therefore, you belong to us now. You will move into this estate immediately, you will act as her primary caregiver, and you will not leave these grounds without my explicit permission. Welcome to your new life, Emma." End of Part 2. Part 3, The Golden Cage. The words hung in the vast, echoing space of the foyer, chilling the air far more effectively than the storm raging outside. "You belong to us now." I stared at Harper, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I waited for a punchline, a smirk, a sign that this was some sort of twisted, arrogant billionaire joke. But Harper's chiseled face remained completely impassive. Her stormy gray eyes were locked onto mine with the intense, predatory focus of an alpha who had already claimed her prize and was simply waiting for the prey to realize it. "Are you completely out of your mind?" I finally choked out, my voice trembling not with fear but with a sudden, blazing fury. I tightened my grip on Lily, who shifted in her sleep, burying her warm little face deeper into the crook of my neck. "I am a human being, not a piece of property you can just add to your portfolio. You can't just kidnap me and force me to live in your house." Harper didn't flinch at my raised voice. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step closer. The sheer physical presence of her, tall, imposing, and radiating that suffocating scent of cedar and bergamot, made my Omega instincts scream at me to bare my neck and submit. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep my chin raised in defiance. "I am not kidnapping you, Emma," Harper said, her tone as smooth and cold as polished ice. "I am offering you a highly exclusive, immensely lucrative employment contract. You will be compensated far beyond whatever meager profits your little coffee shop generates." "I don't care about your money." I snapped, my eyes flashing. My cafe is my life's work. I built it from nothing. I have loyal customers, employees who depend on me, and a life outside of these walls. I am not throwing all of that away because you can't be bothered to figure out how to comfort your own daughter. A dangerous shadow passed over Harper's face, the subtle ticking of her jaw the only sign that my words had struck a nerve. She reached into the inner pocket of her tailored blazer and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times with long, elegant fingers before casually holding it out toward me. While we were in the car, my assistant did a preliminary background check on you and your business, Harper stated, her voice returning to that infuriatingly calm corporate monotone. It seems the daily grind is currently operating on very thin margins. You took out a massive business loan 2 years ago to cover emergency plumbing repairs and a complete espresso bar overhaul. According to my projections, you are 1 bad month away from defaulting on that loan and losing the property entirely. All the air rushed out of my lungs. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. How did you get that information so fast? That's private. Nothing is private from me, Harper replied effortlessly, slipping the phone back into her pocket. Here is my counteroffer, Emma. You will stay here and act as Lily's primary caregiver for 3 months. You will live in this house, you will follow my rules, and you will ensure she is emotionally stabilized. In return, I will pay off your business loan in its entirety. I will also pay the salaries of your staff so they can keep the cafe running in your absence. When the 3 months are up, you will walk away completely debt-free, owning your business outright. I stood frozen, my mind reeling. 3 months. Pay off the loan. It was the crushing weight that kept me awake every single night, the black cloud hanging over my dream. To have it wiped away, it was a miracle. But the price was trading my freedom for a golden cage, chained to the most intimidating, infuriating woman I had ever met. You're blackmailing me, I whispered, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes, utterly overwhelmed by the sheer power this woman wielded so casually. Harper tilted her head, a dark, complex emotion flickering in her eyes for a fraction of a second before vanishing. I am negotiating. I recognize leverage and I use it. My daughter is my top priority. If buying your dad is what it takes to secure her happiness, I would do it 1,000 times over. Before I could form a response, the little girl in my arms stirred. Lily let out a soft, sleepy yawn, her tiny fists rubbing at her eyes. She blinked, her long dark lashes fluttering, and then she looked up at me. For a second, panic flashed in her storm-gray eyes, the exact same eyes as her mother. But then, she inhaled deeply, her little nose twitching as she took in the scent of vanilla and roasted coffee clinging to my clothes. A brilliant, radiant smile broke across her face, completely transforming her from the terrified, sobbing child in the cafe into an angel. "Mommy," Lily whispered, reaching a tiny hand up to cut my cheek. Her palm was incredibly warm, her touch so gentle and trusting that it shattered whatever walls of resistance I had left. I looked down at her, my heart melting into a puddle. I couldn't help but smile back, brushing a stray lock of dark hair away from her forehead. "Hey there, sleepyhead. Did you have a good nap?" Hum," Lily hummed happily, resting her head back against my shoulder, completely content. She didn't even look at the massive, opulent foyer around her. As long as she was holding on to me, she felt safe. I looked up, catching Harper watching the interaction. The billionaire CEO stood completely still, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. There was an undeniable rawness in her expression now, a potent mixture of profound relief that her daughter was smiling, and a dark, twisting jealousy that the smile was directed at a complete stranger. 3 months, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, breaking the heavy silence. Harper's gaze snapped from Lily to me. Her eyes darkened, the alpha dominance flaring in the air between us, thick and heavy. 3 months, I repeated, firmer this time, lifting my chin. But I have conditions. I am not your servant, and I am not your prisoner. I will care for Lily, but I will not be ordered around like one of your board members. I will have access to my phone to manage my cafe remotely, and you will speak to me with basic human respect. If you can't handle that, you can keep your money, and I will walk out that door right now, and you can deal with the fallout. It was an insane bluff. My Omega instincts were absolutely screaming at me to lower my eyes and back down, terrified of challenging a prime alpha in her own territory. But I stood my ground, holding her intense, piercing stare. A heavy, breathless silence stretched between us. Tension was so thick I could practically taste it on my tongue. I waited for the explosion, for her to call her guards to throw me out into the rain. Instead, a slow, incredibly dangerous smirk curled the edges of Harper's lips. It wasn't a corporate, polite smile. It was the predatory grin of an alpha who had just found a challenge worthy of her time. "You are surprisingly fierce for an Omega, Emma," Harper murmured, her voice a low, husky vibration that sent a jolt of heat straight down to my toes. "I accept your terms. 3 months. But make no mistake, while you are under my roof, you play by my rules." Harper turned sharply, her expensive heels clicking loudly against the marble floor. "Follow me. I will show you to your quarters." I swallowed hard, adjusting Lily in my arms, and followed the towering CEO through the sprawling, silent mansion. We walked through endless corridors of glass and modern art, taking a sleek, silent elevator up to the second floor. Harper finally stopped in front of a set of heavy, dark oak double doors. She pushed them open, revealing a bedroom suite that was easily twice the size of my entire apartment. It was breathtakingly beautiful, decorated in soft creams, warm golds, and rich mahogany. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, sweeping view of the storm churning over Lake Washington. A massive, plush king-sized bed dominated the center of the room, and a pair of double doors to the right clearly led to a private nursery. "Lily's room connects directly to yours," Harper explained, her tone strictly business once again. "Your wardrobe has already been stocked with appropriate attire. My staff will bring your personal belongings from your apartment by tomorrow morning." "You already had my clothes brought here?" I asked, my eyes widening in shock. "But I hadn't even agreed yet." Harper turned slowly to face me, standing so close in the doorway that the scent of cedar and rain entirely enveloped me. Her stormy eyes traced the lines of my face, lingering for a fraction of a second on my lips before meeting my gaze. "I told you, Emma," Harper whispered, her voice dropping to that dangerous, intoxicating register that made my pulse race. "I always get what I want. Unpack. Dinner is at 7. Without another word, she turned and walked away down the hall, leaving me standing in the doorway of my lavish, beautiful prison, holding a sleeping toddler and wondering exactly what kind of game the billionaire alpha was playing. Because as I looked at the door directly across the hallway from mine, a massive set of reinforced black steel doors, I realized with a sinking, fluttering feeling in my stomach exactly where my room was located. Harper had placed me directly across from the master suite. Her bedroom. I was right in the alpha's den. End of part 3. Part 4, a seat at the alpha's table. The moment the heavy oak doors clicked shut behind Harper, the crushing weight of her alpha presence faded, leaving the room feeling suddenly entirely too massive. I stood frozen in the center of the lavish suite, the silence of the estate pressing in on my ears. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic breathing of the toddler in my arms and the distant, muffled drumming of the rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows. I gently carried Lily into the adjoining nursery. If my room was breathtaking, the nursery was a masterpiece straight out of a luxury magazine. It was painted in soft, calming pastels, with a beautifully carved wooden crib, shelves overflowing with untouched designer toys, and a plush rocking chair in the corner. I carefully laid the sleeping girl down on the mattress, pulling a soft, cashmere blanket over her small shoulders. For a long moment, I just watched her sleep. The stress lines that had marred her tiny forehead in the cafe were completely gone. She looked peaceful, safe. What on earth have I gotten myself into? I thought, dragging a hand through my messy chestnut hair. I was an Omega baker who lived in cozy sweaters and smelled of yeast and roasted beans. I didn't belong in a sterile, multi-million-dollar fortress, and I certainly didn't belong in the crosshairs of a ruthless corporate titan like Harper Hayes. Yet, looking at the innocent child resting in front of me, I knew I couldn't have walked away. The desperate, shattered way she had cried out for a mother had hooked directly into my soul. With a heavy sigh, I retreated to my own room to inspect the appropriate attire Harper had mentioned. I opened the massive walk-in closet and gasped. Harper hadn't just provided a few changes of clothes, she had stocked an entire wardrobe. Rows upon rows of silk blouses, tailored cashmere slacks, and designer dresses hung in perfect color-coordinated order. Tags were still on them, brands I had only ever seen through the glossy windows of downtown boutiques. It was a blatant, overwhelming display of wealth and control. She wanted me to fit into her pristine, high-society world. My Omega instincts bristled in defiance. I wasn't her trophy, and I wasn't going to play dress-up to stroke her ego. I bypassed the silk and lace, digging toward the back of the closet until I found something slightly more grounded, a soft, oversized cream-colored knit sweater and a pair of dark, high-waisted tailored trousers. It was undeniably expensive, but it felt closer to my own style. I washed my face in the sprawling marble ensuite bathroom, tying my hair back into a loose, comfortable braid. By the time 7 o'clock rolled around, Lily had woken up from her nap. To my immense relief, she didn't panic when she saw the unfamiliar surroundings. Instead, she blinked her stormy gray eyes, spotted me sitting in the rocking chair, and instantly threw her arms out with a bright, beaming smile. "Mommy," she chirped, her voice clear and happy. "Hey there, little bug," I smiled, lifting her onto my hip. "Are you hungry?" Harper said it's time for dinner. I couldn't bring myself to correct her about the mommy title just yet. The wounds were too fresh, the peace too fragile. I carried her downstairs, navigating the maze-like corridors of the estate until we reached the grand dining room. The space was cavernous, illuminated by a modern, cascading crystal chandelier that cast fractured light across a massive, dark mahogany table set for 20 people. But there were only 3 place settings at the far end. Harper was already seated at the head of the table. She had changed out of her severe charcoal suit and into a sleek midnight blue silk button-down, the collar left slightly open, revealing the elegant column of her throat. Without the tailored blazer, her broad shoulders and athletic build were far more apparent. The harsh corporate lighting of the day was gone, replaced by the dim atmospheric glow of the chandelier, which cast dangerous, captivating shadows across her sharp cheekbones. When we walked in, Harper's head snapped up. Her piercing gray eyes instantly locked onto me, scanning my outfit, my messy braid, and the way Lily rested comfortably against my hip. For a fraction of a second, a flare of pure, possessive alpha heat flashed in her gaze, dark and hungry, before she blinked, snapping her impenetrable mask back into place. "You're late," Harper stated, checking the diamond watch on her wrist. "Dinner is served precisely at 7. "It's 7:03, I retorted, sliding into the chair to Harper's right and settling Lily into the high chair next to me. "And we were navigating a house the size of a zip code. Cut us some slack." A subtle twitch at the corner of Harper's mouth was the only indication she had heard my sass. She gestured to the waiting staff, who immediately stepped forward to serve the first course, a delicate, perfectly plated butternut squash soup with truffle oil. The silence that descended over the table was deafening. The clinking of silver spoons against porcelain echoed loudly. I could feel the intense, suffocating weight of Harper's gaze on me. She wasn't eating, she was simply watching me. Watching the way I moved, the way I interacted with her daughter, dissecting my every breath. "No, like it," Lily suddenly whined, pushing her small bowl of soup away. Her lower lip jutted out in a stubborn pout that was a terrifyingly accurate miniature version of her mother's scowl. "Want nuggies?" Harper let out a long, irritated sigh, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Lily, we do not eat processed food in this house. You will eat the soup chef prepared. It is highly nutritious." "No!" Lily shouted, slamming her tiny palms flat against the tray of her high chair. "Nuggies!" Lily Hayes, Harper warned, her voice dropping an octave, slipping into that commanding alpha register. It was a tone that probably made grown men in boardrooms tremble and break into a cold sweat. But Lily was a toddler, and an alpha's command meant nothing in the face of a toddler's tantrum. The little girl's face crumpled, her gray eyes filling with fresh tears, and she took a deep breath, preparing to unleash a deafening wail. "Whoa, hey, okay, pause," I interjected quickly, sliding my hand over Lily's tiny fists before the storm could break. I looked up at the hovering chef, who looked terrified. "Do you have any bread in the kitchen? Maybe some cheese?" Yes, miss. We have an artisanal sourdough and a sharp white cheddar," the chef stammered. "Perfect," I smiled warmly. "Could you toast a piece of the sourdough, melt a little cheese on top, and cut it into tiny squares? We'll call them magic cheese cubes." The chef nodded frantically and practically sprinted back into the kitchen. I turned back to Lily, who was sniffling but had paused her meltdown, distracted by my intervention. "We're going to have magic cheese cubes, sweetie," I murmured softly, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. "But you have to promise to take at least 2 bites of your soup while we wait." "Deal." Lily looked at the soup, then at me, her little brow furrowed in thought. "Finally," she nodded slowly. "Deal." I picked up her small spoon, blew on the soup to cool it down, and guided it to her mouth. She swallowed it without complaint, keeping her eyes fixed on my face. The entire exchange took less than 2 minutes. When I finally looked up, the air in the room had shifted entirely. Harper was staring at me as if I had just performed a literal miracle. The icy, untouchable CEO was completely frozen, her stormy gray eyes wide with an emotion I couldn't quite place. The scent of her, cedar and bergamot, suddenly spiked, filling the dining room with a thick, intoxicating heat that made my skin flush and my breath hitch in my throat. "Maria tried to force her to eat vegetables for a week," Harper murmured, her voice uncharacteristically soft, almost breathless. "It ended in screaming matches every night." "How did you?" "You can't negotiate with a toddler like a hostile corporate takeover," I said quietly, holding her intense gaze. The air between us crackled with electricity. "You have to meet them where they are. Give them a choice, even a small one, and they feel safe. She doesn't need an alpha commanding her, Harper. She needs patience." Harper didn't respond immediately. She just continued to stare at me, her chest rising and falling slowly beneath the silk of her shirt. For a moment, the world outside the dining room simply vanished. It was just the two of us, locked in a silent battle of wills, the Alpha and the Omega, circling each other in the heavy, scented air. "Patience," Harper finally repeated, the word rolling off her tongue like a foreign language. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes darkening as they traced the line of my jaw, dropping to my lips and slowly rising back to meet my gaze. "I am not a patient woman, Emma." "I gathered that," I whispered, my heart thumping wildly against my ribs. "But for you," Harper said, her voice dropping to a husky, dangerous rumble that sent a shockwave of heat straight to my core, "I might be willing to learn." The chef returning with the plate of toasted cheese broke the spell. I violently cleared my throat, tearing my eyes away from Harper and focusing all my attention back on Lily. My hands were trembling slightly as I fed the little girl her dinner, acutely aware of the billionaire alpha watching my every move from the head of the table. The rest of the meal passed in a tense, simmering silence. Every time I reached for my water glass, I could feel Harper's eyes tracking the movement of my wrist. Every time I smiled at Lily, I could smell a spike of that possessive, dark cedar in the air. By the time dinner concluded, my nerves were completely frayed. I excused myself quickly, scooping a yawning Lily out of her high chair. "We're going to get ready for bed," I announced to the room at large, avoiding Harper's gaze as I practically fled toward the stairs. I gave Lily a warm bath, dressing her in a pair of soft, fuzzy pajamas. As I tucked her into the grand wooden crib, she grabbed onto the sleeve of my sweater, pulling me down slightly. "Mommy, stay," she mumbled sleepily, her eyelids drooping. "I'm right next door, sweetie." "I'll leave the door open," I promised, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. I waited until her breathing deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep before quietly slipping out of the nursery and retreating to my own room. I shut the heavy oak doors, finally letting out a massive breath I felt like I had been holding since I arrived. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the dark, storm-tossed lake below. The reflection in the glass showed a tired Omega who had just sold 3 months of her life to a woman who terrified and intrigued her in equal measure. Suddenly, a reflection moved in the glass. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Harper was standing inside my bedroom. She had opened the door so silently I hadn't even heard the click of the latch. She was leaning casually against the doorframe, her arms crossed over her chest, the midnight blue silk of her shirt shimmering in the dim light of the bedside lamp. "What are you doing in here?" I gasped, instinctively taking a step back until my shoulders hit the cold glass of the window. Harper pushed off the doorframe, walking slowly, deliberately across the plush carpet toward me. The scent of her rolled off her in waves, dominant, heavy, and absolutely intoxicating. She didn't stop until she was less than a foot away, her towering height forcing me to tilt my head back to look at her. "I told you, Emma," Harper whispered, lifting a hand to gently, terrifyingly tuck a loose strand of chestnut hair behind my ear. Her fingers brushed against my skin, sending a jolt of pure electricity down my spine. "You play by my rules in this house. And rule number 1. She leaned in, her lips hovering mere inches from my ear, her warm breath ghosting across my sensitized skin. "Is that you never run from me." End of Part 4. Part 5, the boundaries we cross. The air in my bedroom grew impossibly thin. With Harper standing so close, every breath I took was entirely saturated with her sharp, commanding scent. Cedar and rain-soaked earth wrapped around me like a physical weight, pressing against my Omega instincts, demanding a submission I was desperately trying to withhold. "I wasn't running," I managed to say, though my voice came out as a breathless whisper that betrayed exactly how rattled I was. I pressed my back harder against the cold glass of the window, needing the physical grounding. "I was putting your daughter to bed. And I was trying to get some sleep. Which is what normal people do at this hour." Harper's hand lingered near my face, her knuckles lightly brushing against the sensitive skin of my neck. I shuddered involuntarily, a sudden rush of heat flooding my veins. Her stormy gray eyes tracked the movement, darkening with a primal, satisfied intensity. "You are easily startled, Emma," Harper murmured, her gaze dropping to the rapid pulse beating at the base of my throat. "Like a fawn caught in the headlights of a very fast car." "Then maybe you should stop driving so recklessly," I snapped back, summoning every ounce of my fading courage. I reached up and firmly wrapped my hand around her wrist, pushing her hand away from my neck. Her skin was incredibly warm, the muscles beneath her silk shirt taut and strong like coiled steel. "I agreed to your terms, Harper. I will stay here and I will care for Lily. But this," I gestured to the non-existent space between us, "this intimidation tactic ends now. I am not one of your employees and I am not your prey. Do not walk into my bedroom uninvited again." For a terrible, agonizing moment, the silence was deafening. I had just grabbed a billionaire alpha by the wrist and given her an order in her own home. The sheer audacity of it made my stomach plummet. I fully expected her to snap, to summon her guards, or to unleash the terrifying corporate wrath she was so famous for. Instead, Harper looked down at my hand wrapped around her wrist and then back up to my face. A slow, devastating smirk spread across her lips. It wasn't the cold, calculating smile of a CEO, it was something far more dangerous. It was the smile of a hunter who had just realized the chase was going to be incredibly entertaining. "Fascinating," Harper whispered softly. She didn't pull her arm away. She simply let me hold her, leaning into my space just a fraction more. "You have fire in your veins, little baker. I look forward to seeing how long it takes to burn you out." Before I could formulate a response, Harper stepped back, instantly severing the electric tension that tethered us. The suffocating weight of her alpha aura retreated, leaving me gasping for air as if I had just surfaced from underwater. Good night, Emma, she said smoothly, her face instantly returning to its flawless, impenetrable mask. Breakfast is at exactly 7:30. Do not be late. She turned and walked out of the room, pulling the heavy oak doors shut behind her with a soft, final click. I slumped against the window, my legs trembling so violently they could barely support my weight. I pressed the heels of my hands against my burning cheeks. 3 months. I had to survive 3 months in this golden cage with a woman who played my nervous system like a grand piano. The next morning, the storm had finally broken. Brilliant, crisp sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden rays across the plush cream carpets of my suite. I woke up to the feeling of something warm and heavy resting on my chest. I blinked my eyes open to find Lily sprawled completely over me, her cheek pressed against my collarbone, softly snoring. She had clearly climbed out of her crib at some point during the night and crawled into my bed. My heart swelled with a fierce, protective ache. I wrapped my arms around her small, warm body, inhaling the sweet scent of baby shampoo. This was why I was here. Despite the terrifying billionaire across the hall, this little girl needed someone to hold her. "Morning, Bug," I whispered, kissing the top of her dark hair as she began to stir. Lily blinked her gray eyes open, a sleepy smile instantly taking over her face. "Mommy," she hummed, snuggling closer. We spent the next 30 minutes getting ready. I dressed Lily in a pair of soft denim overalls and a bright yellow sweater, brushing her dark hair into 2 neat little pigtails. I opted for a simple white blouse and a pair of tailored black slacks from the massive wardrobe Harper had provided, pinning my chestnut hair up into a professional bun. I wanted to look put together. I wanted to look like I belonged, if only to shield myself from Harper's judgmental gaze. When we descended the sweeping glass staircase, the house was entirely silent, save for the soft clicking of our shoes. We made our way to the dining room, but to my immense surprise, it was completely empty. The long mahogany table was bare. "Excuse me." I called out to a passing maid who was carrying a stack of fresh linens. "Is breakfast somewhere else?" The maid stopped, her eyes widening slightly as she looked at me. "Oh, Ms. Emma." Ms. Hayes had an urgent international conference call. She left for the corporate office at 5 this morning. She instructed us to serve you and Lily in the sunroom. Relief washed over me so powerfully it almost made me dizzy. I didn't have to face those piercing gray eyes over a bowl of oatmeal. "Thank you," I breathed out. Breakfast in the sunroom was idyllic. The room was encased in glass, overlooking a beautifully manicured garden that sparkled with morning dew. Lily happily ate a mountain of blueberry pancakes, chattering away to me about her stuffed animals. For a brief, wonderful hour, I almost forgot I was a prisoner of a corporate contract. But reality had a funny way of catching up. After breakfast, I settled Lily in the nursery with a large box of building blocks. While she was distracted, I pulled out my cell phone. Harper had promised I could manage my cafe remotely, and my chest squeezed with anxiety as I dialed Chloe's number. The line rang twice before Chloe picked up, her voice breathless and frantic. "Emma! Oh my God, are you okay? Are you alive? Do I need to call the police or like the FBI?" I couldn't help but laugh softly. "I'm fine, Chloe. I'm okay. I'm just at the estate. How are things at the shop? Are you guys managing the morning rush?" There was a long, bizarre silence on the other end of the line. "Emma," Chloe finally said, her voice dropping to an awestruck whisper. "What exactly did you do to that billionaire?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? What happened?" This morning, a team of like 5 men in tailored suits showed up at the cafe at 5 a.m. They brought a brand new, top-of-the-line Italian espresso machine. The one we've been drooling over for a year. They installed it in 20 minutes. Then, a commercial plumber came and completely replaced the pipes in the back room. "What?" I gasped, my grip tightening on the phone. "That's not all," Chloe continued, sounding slightly hysterical. A guy with an earpiece handed me an envelope. It had a cashier's check in it. Emma, she paid off the business loan. All of it. The bank literally called me an hour ago to confirm the account was closed. And she doubled all of our hourly wages for the next 3 months. I sank onto the edge of the plush rocking chair, the blood draining from my face. She actually did it. In less than 24 hours, Harper Hayes had completely erased the crushing financial burden that had kept me awake for 2 years. But she didn't just pay it off, she had interfered. She had sent men into my sanctuary, replaced my equipment, and taken control of my staff's payroll. It wasn't a gift, it was a hostile takeover. She was marking her territory, making absolutely sure I knew exactly who owned me. "Chloe, I have to go," I said, my voice trembling with a sudden blazing fury. "Wait, Emma." I hung up, dropping the phone onto the cushion. My Omega instincts were entirely overridden by the fierce, territorial anger of a small business owner who had just been forcefully micromanaged. "Lily, sweetie," I called out, my voice tight. "We're going to take a little field trip to your mom's office." Lily looked up from her tower of blocks, her eyes wide, but she quickly nodded and reached for my hand. I marched out of the nursery, holding Lily's small hand, and headed straight for the front doors. A bodyguard in a dark suit immediately stepped into my path, his face a stone mask. "Ms. Hayes requested that you remain on the premises, ma'am," the guard stated smoothly. "Ms. Hayes can take her requests and shove them," I snapped, the fire in my veins burning hotter than ever. "I am getting in a car and you are taking me to Hayes International. Now. Or you can explain to your boss why her daughter is having a massive meltdown in the foyer." I looked down at Lily and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Taking my cue, Lily immediately scrunched up her face, her bottom lip jutting out, and let out a high-pitched warning whine. The bodyguard paled visibly, his eyes darting between my furious expression and the incoming toddler storm. "Right this way, ma'am." The Hayes International building was a towering monolith of black glass and steel in the center of downtown Seattle. It looked exactly like Harper, imposing, cold, and undeniably powerful. I strode through the massive lobby, entirely ignoring the shocked stares of the employees. A woman with a messy bun, carrying a toddler in yellow overalls, flanked by 2 massive bodyguards, was clearly not a common sight here. We were escorted into a private glass elevator that shot up to the top floor. The doors slid open to reveal a pristine, minimalist reception area. A terrified-looking executive assistant jumped up from behind a desk as I marched past him. "Ma'am, you can't go in there." "Ms. Hayes is in a meeting," he stammered, chasing after me. "Watch me," I growled. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the CEO's office. The room was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a dizzying view of the city. Harper was standing behind a massive obsidian desk, surrounded by 5 older men in expensive suits. She was in the middle of speaking, her voice sharp and commanding, when the doors slammed open. The 5 men froze, staring at me in absolute shock. Harper stopped mid-sentence. Her stormy gray eyes locked onto me, taking in my flushed face, my heaving chest, and the toddler clinging happily to my hand. For a fraction of a second, absolute surprise cracked her icy facade. "Emma," Harper said, her voice a low rumble that instantly silenced the murmurs of the men in the room. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I demanded, stepping fully into the room, entirely uncaring of the multi-million-dollar deals I was interrupting. "Right now." The executives looked at Harper, waiting for the inevitable explosion. They waited for the Alpha CEO to obliterate the foolish woman who dared to interrupt her. But Harper didn't yell. She simply looked at me, a dark, incredibly possessive heat flaring in the depths of her eyes. "Gentlemen," Harper said smoothly, not breaking eye contact with me. "Get out." End of Part 5. Part 6, The Lion's Den. The 5 seasoned executives didn't just walk out of the office, they practically tripped over themselves in their haste to escape the sudden, suffocating shift in the room's atmosphere. Papers were hastily shoved into leather briefcases, apologies were mumbled to the floor, and within 10 seconds the heavy mahogany double doors clicked completely shut, sealing the three of us inside the sprawling, glass-walled office. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and charged with an electric tension that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. I stood my ground in the center of the plush, monochromatic rug, my chest heaving with adrenaline. My hand gripped Lily's tightly, anchoring myself as I stared down the most feared alpha in the Pacific Northwest. Harper hadn't moved. She stood behind her massive obsidian desk, her hands resting flat against the polished surface. She was wearing a tailored, deep crimson suit today, the color stark and aggressive against the gray Seattle skyline looming behind her. Her stormy eyes were unreadable, fixed on me with a laser-like intensity that made my Omega instincts scream at me to drop my gaze and bare my neck. I refused. I lifted my chin higher, letting my anger burn through the instinctual fear. An Italian espresso machine? I demanded, my voice breaking the silence like a gunshot. A commercial plumbing overhaul? Doubling my staff's wages? What is wrong with you, Harper? Harper didn't flinch. She slowly stood to her full, towering height, entirely unbothered by my outburst. I see you have spoken with your barista. I assume the installation was completed to a satisfactory standard. That is entirely not the point, I yelled, dropping Lily's hand for a second to throw my arms up in frustration, before quickly taking it back when the toddler looked up at me with wide eyes. You invaded my business. You sent men into my cafe at 5 a.m. to rip out my equipment and replace it without even asking me. That cafe is mine, Harper. It is the one thing in my life that I built completely on my own. You had no right to touch it. Harper stepped out from behind the desk, her movements slow, deliberate, and entirely predatory. The sheer physical presence of her commanded the vast space of the office. As she moved closer, her scent hit me, that intoxicating dominant blend of sharp cedar, crushed rain, and expensive bergamot. It was thicker here in her territory, unfiltered and potent, wrapping around me and making my pulse hammer wildly against my ribs. I bought your debt, Emma, Harper stated, her voice a smooth, low hum that vibrated in the air between us. Which means I assumed the risk of your business. According to the report my team filed yesterday, your espresso machine was outdated, leaking, and a blatant electrical hazard. Plumbing was one hard freeze away from bursting and flooding the entire block. I do not tolerate poor investments. I simply optimized your operation. I am not an operation to be optimized. I fired back, my eyes flashing. I am a human being. I don't care how much money you have. You do not get to micromanage my life just because you think you know better. Harper stopped exactly 2 feet away from me. The height difference was staggering. I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. The air between us was so hot, so incredibly thick with tension that I could barely draw a full breath. Mommy, Lily suddenly piped up, entirely oblivious to the silent, raging battle of wills happening above her head. Both Harper and I snapped our attention down to the toddler. Lily was pointing a tiny, chubby finger at the sprawling glass coffee table in the seating area of the office, which was covered in glossy architectural blueprints. Color? Lily asked, looking up at Harper with those big, stormy gray eyes that mirrored her mother's perfectly. For a fraction of a second, the terrifying, icy CEO vanished. Harper's broad shoulders softened, and a small, almost imperceptible sigh escaped her lips. She walked over to the coffee table, her crimson suit shifting flawlessly with her movements. She picked up a thick stack of blank, premium corporate letterhead and pulled a solid gold, custom-engraved fountain pen from the inner pocket of her blazer. Here, Harper said, crouching down to hand the items to her daughter. You may color on these. Do not draw on the carpet, Lily. Understood. Okay, Lily chirped happily, dropping onto her stomach on the plush rug, immediately uncapping the heavy pen and beginning to aggressively scribble on the expensive paper. Harper watched her for a moment, an expression of profound, guarded complexity crossing her sharp features. Then she slowly stood up, turning her attention back to me. The softness vanished instantly, replaced once again by the intense, calculating alpha. You barged into my corporate headquarters, Harper murmured, stepping back into my personal space. You interrupted a negotiation for a $50 million land acquisition. You bypassed my security, threatened my guards, and screamed at me in my own office. I swallowed hard, the reality of what I had just done finally crashing over me. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, terrifying awareness of my vulnerability. I was angry. You crossed a line. I did, Harper agreed, surprising me so completely that my mouth fell open slightly. She took another step closer, forcing me to instinctively take a step back until my shoulders hit the cold, solid glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows. I was trapped between the dizzying drop to the Seattle streets below and the overwhelming, burning presence of the Alpha CEO in front of me. Harper reached out, her hand hovering just inches from my waist. She didn't touch me, but the heat radiating from her skin seeped through the thin fabric of my blouse, sending a dangerous, thrilling shiver down my spine. I crossed a line because I wanted to see what you would do, Harper whispered, her voice dropping to a husky, intimate register that was meant entirely for me. Her eyes darkened, tracing the flushed line of my cheek, dropping to my lips and lingering there. I wanted to see if the fire I saw in the cafe was real, or if you were just another Omega who would eventually fold under the weight of my money. I stared at her, my breath catching in my throat. You played a game with my livelihood to test me? I secured your livelihood, Harper corrected softly. And in return, I got exactly what I wanted. I got you, flushed and furious, marching into my territory demanding to be heard. No one speaks to me the way you do, Emma. No one dares. Maybe if they did, you wouldn't be so unbearable, I breathed out, unable to break her hypnotic gaze. A dark, incredibly dangerous smirk curled the edges of Harper's perfectly painted lips. Slowly, deliberately, she rested her hands flat against the glass on either side of my head, completely caging me in. The scent of cedar and bergamot spiked, heavy with undeniable arousal, short-circuiting my brain and making my knees feel entirely too weak. Careful, little baker, Harper murmured, leaning in so close that the tip of her nose almost brushed mine. I could feel the heat of her breath against my lips, completely intoxicating. You are playing a very dangerous game, challenging an alpha in her own den. I'm not playing, I whispered back, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound brave. I just want you to respect my boundaries. Harper's eyes flared with a sudden intense heat. I am trying very hard to respect your boundaries, Emma. But when you look at me like that, defiant and entirely unafraid, it makes me want to break every single one of them. My heart stopped. The world around us narrowed down to the space between our lips, the heavy electric tension pulling us together like magnets. My Omega instincts were no longer terrified. They were humming, a deep, desperate vibration that begged me to close the distance, to let the alpha take control. Mommy, look! Lily shouted from the floor. The spell shattered instantly. Harper stepped back, clearing her throat and adjusting the lapels of her crimson blazer, though I noticed a faint, telltale flush of color high on her sharp cheekbones. I let out a shaky, jagged breath, pressing my hands against the cool glass behind me to keep from collapsing. We both turned to look at Lily. Toddler was proudly holding up a piece of the expensive letterhead, completely covered in chaotic, jagged black scribbles. It's a doggy, Lily announced proudly. It's beautiful, sweetie, I managed to say, my voice slightly breathless. I walked over and picked her up, desperate for the physical grounding her small, warm body provided. Harper watched us, her chest rising and falling with a slightly uneven rhythm. She walked back around her desk, leaning against the edge of it and crossing her long legs at the ankles. Since you are already here in the city, Harper said, her voice returning to its cool, corporate smoothness, though her stormy eyes remained fixed on my flushed face, we have a change of schedule for this evening. I immediately went on the defensive, holding Lily a little tighter. What kind of change? The annual Hayes International Charity Gala is tonight, Harper stated. It is a highly publicized event. The mayor will be there, along with the board of directors and majority shareholders. Traditionally, I attend alone. However, an opportunistic paparazzi managed to snap a photo of you carrying Lily out of your cafe yesterday, flanked by my security. The photo was leaked to a local gossip blog this morning. My stomach plummeted to my shoes. What? They took pictures of us? They did, Harper confirmed, her jaw tightening in annoyance. The press is currently speculating that I have hired a secret surrogate, or that I am involved in a scandalous, hidden relationship. Both rumors are bad for the company's stock price. The board is demanding clarity regarding my sudden interest in a struggling downtown bakery. So, what does that mean? I asked, a sense of dread pooling in my gut. Harper pushed off the desk, her eyes locking onto mine with an unyielding, authoritative command that left absolutely zero room for argument. It means, Harper said smoothly, that tonight you are not just my daughter's caregiver. You will attend the gala by my side. You will smile for the cameras, you will charm the board members, and you will play the role of my devoted live-in partner. Partner? I choked out, my eyes widening in sheer panic. Harper, I can't do that. I don't know anything about high society or corporate galas. I bake muffins for a living. You will be fine, Harper dismissed easily, waving a hand. I have already dispatched a team of stylists to the estate. They will ensure you look the part. She stepped closer, the dangerous smirk returning to her lips, making my pulse instantly race again. I bought you a dress, Emma, Harper whispered, her eyes dropping to trace the line of my body with a heated, possessive look. And tonight, you are going to wear it for me. End of Part 6. Part 7, The Emerald Illusion. The ride back to the Hayes estate was a blur of frantic anxiety and deeply conflicted Omega instincts. My mind was reeling. A gala. High society. Playing the devoted partner of a billionaire alpha who terrified and captivated me in equal measure. I was entirely out of my depth. The moment I stepped through the grand double doors of the mansion, I was ambushed. Harper hadn't been exaggerating about the stylists. A team of 4 impeccably dressed professionals was waiting for me in the foyer. Before I could even protest, Lily was gently whisked away by the new, highly vetted nighttime nanny, and I was marched up the glass staircase to my suite. For the next 3 hours, I was plucked, primed, and polished. My usually messy chestnut hair was transformed into cascading, glossy waves that fell elegantly over one shoulder. My makeup was dramatic but sophisticated. A smoky eye that brought out the amber flecks in my irises and a deep, matte crimson lip that made my mouth look dangerously soft. Then came the dress. When the lead stylist unzipped the black garment bag, all the air rushed out of my lungs. It wasn't a dress, it was a weapon. It was crafted from heavy, liquid silk in a deep, mesmerizing shade of emerald green. Featured a plunging cowl neckline that left just enough to the imagination, held up by impossibly thin, glittering diamond straps that crisscrossed over a completely bare back. A daring, thigh-high slit was cut into the flowing skirt. It was the absolute antithesis of my flour-dusted aprons and oversized sweaters. Ms. Hayes personally selected this piece from a private Milan collection, the stylist murmured, helping me slip it on. She has exceptional taste. When I finally looked at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. The emerald green contrasted beautifully with my fair skin and chestnut hair, making me look radiant, powerful, and undeniably expensive. I didn't look like a baker from downtown Seattle. I looked like a woman who belonged on the arm of a titan. A sharp knock on the heavy oak doors broke my trance. "It is time," Harper's voice called from the hallway, muffled but still carrying that authoritative, thrumming alpha vibration. The stylists quickly packed up their kits and slipped out the side door, leaving me alone. I took a deep, shaky breath, smoothing my trembling hands over the cool silk of the dress. I slipped on the strappy diamond heels they had left for me and slowly opened the door. I stepped out into the hallway and walked to the edge of the sweeping glass staircase. Harper was waiting in the grand foyer below. If I thought she was intimidating in a corporate suit, she was absolutely lethal in formal wear. She was wearing a custom-tailored midnight black tuxedo that fit her athletic frame with terrifying perfection. The sharp silk lapels emphasized her broad shoulders, and a crisp, blindingly white shirt was unbuttoned just enough at the collar to tease the smooth skin of her throat. Her dark obsidian hair was styled back flawlessly, emphasizing her razor-sharp cheekbones. As my heels clicked against the first glass step, Harper looked up. She froze completely. The impatient, commanding CEO vanished, replaced by an alpha who had just been struck by lightning. Her stormy gray eyes widened, instantly dilating until they were almost entirely black. The suffocatingly heavy scent of cedar, petrichor, and bergamot spiked violently in the air, rushing up the staircase and wrapping around me in a thick, possessive wave of pure heat. I descended the stairs slowly, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs under her intense, unwavering scrutiny. Every step felt like a lifetime. When I reached the bottom, I stopped a foot away from her, suddenly hyper-aware of how bare my back felt under her heated gaze. "Wow," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "Is the illusion acceptable?" Harper didn't answer immediately. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, closing the distance between us. She reached out, her knuckles gently brushing against my bare shoulder. Contrast of her warm skin against the cool silk sent a violent shiver down my spine. Her eyes dragged from my crimson lips, down the plunging neckline of the dress, and back up to meet my gaze. "You are devastating," Harper murmured, her voice dropping to a husky, raw register that made my knees feel dangerously weak. "I knew the green would suit you, but this is a hazard to my self-control." Before I could process the heavy implication of her words, Harper cleared her throat, snapping her impenetrable, icy mask back into place. She offered me her arm. "The car is waiting. Remember the rules, Emma. We are presenting a united front. You smile, you stay by my side, and you let me handle the press. Are we clear?" "Crystal," I breathed, looping my arm through hers. The ride to the venue in the back of the armored limousine was incredibly tense. Harper sat dangerously close to me, her solid thigh pressing against mine. The physical contact was a constant, burning reminder of the charade we were about to perform. When the limo finally pulled up to the grand entrance of the Seattle Art Museum, it felt like descending into a war zone. The red carpet was lined with barricades, and behind them stood a thrashing sea of paparazzi, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. "Breathe, Emma," Harper instructed softly, placing a warm hand over mine. "I've got you." The door opened, and the roar of the crowd was deafening. Harper stepped out first, immediately commanding the space before turning to offer me her hand. The moment my diamond heels hit the red carpet, the flashing lights were blinding. "Harper. Harper. Over here. Who is the mystery woman? Is it true she's Lily's new mother? Harper, are the wedding rumors true?" I flinched at the barrage of shouted questions, my Omega instincts urging me to hide from the overwhelming aggression. But before panic could set in, Harper moved. She wrapped a strong, incredibly possessive arm around my bare waist, pulling me flush against her side. The heat of her palm against my exposed skin sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. She leaned down, burying her face slightly into the crook of my neck under the guise of whispering something to me. She was subtly, effectively scenting me, coating me in her alpha pheromones in front of the entire world, a primitive and undeniable claim that screamed mine to anyone paying attention. "Just keep walking. Look at the cameras and give them that beautiful, defiant smile of yours," Harper murmured against my ear, her breath ghosting over my skin. I forced my lips to curve upward, clinging to her tuxedo jacket as she expertly navigated us through the sea of flashing bulbs and into the sanctuary of the museum. The interior of the gala was a staggering display of wealth. A string quartet played softly in the corner, and waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of champagne. The ballroom was packed with the city's elite, old money, and corporate sharks. The moment we entered, a hushed silence rippled through the crowd. Hundreds of eyes turned to stare at the ruthless CEO and her unknown, emerald-clad companion. Harper didn't flinch. She kept her hand firmly planted on my waist, leading me into the center of the room with the arrogance of a conquering queen. Didn't take long for the sharks to circle. "Harper, darling." "What an absolute surprise," a slick, condescending voice called out. We turned to see a tall, gray-haired man in a bespoke suit approaching us. He had a smug, superior smile plastered on his face. "Richard," Harper greeted, her voice dropping 20 degrees. "I wasn't aware you were still in town. I thought the board exiled you to the London office." Richard chuckled, though his eyes remained cold. "Only temporarily. But I see you've been quite busy here in Seattle." "And who is this charming creature?" he asked, turning his gaze to me, looking me up and down like a piece of meat on display. "This is Emma," Harper stated, her grip tightening warningly on my waist. "My partner." "Ah, yes. The rumor mill has been quite active today," Richard purred, taking a sip of his scotch. "They say you found her slinging lattes in a quaint little muffin shop downtown. Quite the Cinderella story. Tell me, Emma, how does one make the leap from serving burnt espresso to rubbing elbows with billionaires? It must be terribly overwhelming for someone of your background." Harper's jaw clenched, a low, dangerous rumble beginning to vibrate in her chest. I could feel her alpha instincts flaring, preparing to absolutely decimate the man for insulting me. But I didn't need a billionaire to fight my battles. I placed a gentle, restraining hand over Harper's, stopping her. I looked Richard dead in the eye, offering him a sweet, razor-sharp smile. "It's not overwhelming at all, Richard," I replied smoothly, my voice carrying clearly over the music. "Actually, running a small business requires a comprehensive understanding of overhead margins, supply chain logistics, and direct consumer engagement. It's grounded in reality, which is quite refreshing compared to corporate boardrooms, where people often mistake inherited wealth for actual intelligence." Richard's smug smile instantly vanished, his face flushing an ugly shade of red. Several people standing nearby poorly stifled their gasps of shock. "Furthermore," I continued softly, "my espresso is never burnt. It's perfectly extracted. You should stop by sometime. It might cure that bitter disposition of yours." Total silence descended on our little circle. I looked up at Harper. The CEO was staring at me, her stormy gray eyes wide with absolute awe. The dark, possessive heat in her gaze had amplified 1,000 times over, burning so brightly it took my breath away. "Excuse us, Richard," Harper practically purred, her voice dripping with dangerous, triumphant satisfaction. "My partner and I are going to dance." Without waiting for his response, Harper turned and guided me smoothly away from the sputtering board member and directly onto the marble dance floor. She pulled me flush against her chest, wrapping both of her arms securely around my waist. I instinctively rested my hands on her broad shoulders, my heart pounding as we began to sway to the slow, haunting melody of the string quartet. "You," Harper whispered, staring down at me as if I were the only person in the entire universe, "are absolutely magnificent." "I told you," I breathed out, the tension of the confrontation melting away in the overwhelming heat of her embrace. "I'm not a trophy, Harper. I don't need you to protect me." "I know," Harper murmured. Her hand slid up my bare back, her long fingers tracing the line of my spine, sending a cascade of sparks through my nervous system. She leaned down until her lips were a fraction of an inch from mine, her heavy, intoxicating scent completely enveloping my senses. "But you must understand, Emma," Harper whispered, her stormy eyes dropping to my lips. "The line between this charade and reality is beginning to blur very quickly for me." End of Part 7. Part 8, The Velvet Trap. The heavy, intoxicating weight of Harper's confession hung between us, thicker than the expensive perfume and cologne wafting through the ballroom. The line is beginning to blur. My breath hitched, my chest rising and falling rapidly against the crisp white silk of her tuxedo shirt. I looked up into her stormy gray eyes, expecting to see the calculating CEO testing a new strategy, but the armor was completely gone. In its place was a raw, burning hunger, a prime alpha staring at her chosen Omega, fighting a losing battle against her own primal instincts. Harper, I whispered, the name slipping past my lips like a prayer. Her gaze dropped to my mouth again. The hand resting on my bare back flexed, her long fingers pressing firmly into my spine, pulling me a fraction of an inch closer until our bodies were flush from chest to knee. The sheer heat radiating from her athletic frame was dizzying. I could feel the steady, thumping rhythm of her heart perfectly matching my own frantic pulse. Slowly, inevitably, she leaned down. Her heavy scent of cedar and rain-soaked earth completely eclipsed the rest of the room. I let my eyes flutter shut, my Omega instincts humming in absolute terrifying surrender. I tilted my chin up, waiting for the devastating collision of her lips against mine. Flash. A blinding burst of white light pierced my closed eyelids, followed by the rapid-fire clicking of a camera shutter. Harper flinched as if she had been physically struck. The romantic, suspended reality shattered instantly. She whipped her head to the side, her eyes narrowing into dangerous, lethal slits. A rogue paparazzi had somehow bypassed the security perimeter and was standing just a few feet away, practically shoving a massive lens into our faces. Harper! Emma! Give us a kiss for the front page, the photographer shouted shamelessly. A low, terrifying growl vibrated deep within Harper's chest, a sound so purely alpha that it made the surrounding guests physically step back in alarm. Her arm tightened around my waist in an iron grip, shielding me from the intrusive lens. "Security," Harper commanded, her voice slicing through the classical music like a serrated blade. Within 3 seconds, 4 massive men in dark suits descended upon the photographer, confiscating his camera and physically dragging him out of the ballroom by his collar. The entire room had gone dead silent, watching the spectacle with wide eyes. Harper didn't look at the crowd. She looked down at me, her chest heaving, a muscle ticking violently in her jaw. The vulnerability from a moment ago had been entirely replaced by a lethal, territorial fury. "We are leaving," she stated, leaving absolutely no room for debate. Before I could even nod, Harper was guiding me off the dance floor. She didn't let go of my waist for a single second. We bypassed the mayor, ignored the panicked shouts of the event coordinators, and marched straight out the grand front doors into the cool, damp Seattle night. The limo was waiting at the curb. Harper practically shoved me inside, climbing in right behind me and slamming the heavy door shut with enough force to shake the armored chassis. "Drive," she barked to the chauffeur. The glass partition immediately slid up, sealing us in the dimly lit private cabin. The heavy silence of the vehicle wrapped around us, completely suffocating. Harper sat on the opposite side of the plush leather seat, creating a deliberate physical distance between us. She ran a shaking hand through her flawlessly styled obsidian hair, ruining the severe look. She reached into the center console, pulled out a crystal decanter of amber liquid, and poured herself a glass with jerky, uncoordinated movements. She downed the expensive whiskey in one swallow, the glass clinking sharply against her teeth. "Harper?" I asked softly, pulling the silk shawl tighter around my shoulders. The sudden loss of her body heat left me shivering. "Are you okay?" "I am fine," she clipped out, refusing to look at me. She stared out the tinted window at the blurring city lights, her jaw set in stone. The air in the cabin was saturated with her scent, but it wasn't the intoxicating, seductive cedar from the dance floor. It was sharp, distressed, and completely overwhelmed by the smell of burnt ozone, the scent of an alpha forcefully suppressing their instincts. "You don't smell fine," I pushed, my own Omega nature reacting to her distress. I hated the distance between us. I hated the cold mask she had slammed back into place. "You're angry." "I am not angry with you, Emma," Harper said softly, finally turning her head to look at me. The sheer exhaustion in her eyes made my heart ache. "I am angry with myself. I promised I would never let the press get close enough to exploit my family again. And tonight I was so distracted by—" She swallowed hard, her gaze dropping to the plunging neckline of my emerald dress before snapping back to my eyes. "I lost focus. And in my world, losing focus is how you lose everything. The ride back to the estate passed in a heavy, charged silence. The moment the limo parked in the massive garage, Harper stepped out and walked into the house without waiting for me, practically fleeing the suffocating tension between us. I took off my diamond heels in the foyer, carrying them in my hand as I padded silently up the sweeping glass staircase. My first stop was the nursery. I cracked the heavy oak door open and peeked inside. The soft, rhythmic breathing of Lily greeted me. She was fast asleep, clutching a plush bunny to her chest. A wave of profound tenderness washed over me. I walked over, adjusted her blanket, and placed a gentle kiss on her warm forehead. Family. The word echoed in my mind. Harper had called us her family in the limo. I quietly retreated to my own suite, unzipping the gorgeous, dangerous emerald dress and letting it pool on the floor. I scrubbed the heavy makeup off my face and changed into my oversized, worn-out gray sweatpants and a massive, comfortable hoodie. It was the armor of my old life, a desperate attempt to ground myself in a reality that was rapidly slipping away. But I was entirely too wired to sleep. My pulse was still racing from the near kiss, my skin still humming where Harper had touched me. Needing something to do with my hands, I crept out of my room and made my way down to the massive, sterile kitchen on the first floor. It was a chef's dream, filled with stainless steel and marble, but it felt entirely devoid of love. I began rummaging through the immense walk-in pantry, finally locating flour, sugar, butter, and a bag of premium dark chocolate chunks. If there was one thing I knew how to do, it was bake my way out of an anxiety attack. I set to work. The rhythmic, repetitive motion of measuring, whisking, and folding the dough was exactly what I needed. The aggressive, metallic smell of the sterile kitchen slowly began to surrender to the warm, comforting aroma of vanilla extract and melting butter. I had just pulled a tray of perfectly golden chocolate chunk cookies out of the industrial oven when I felt it. The heavy, thrumming weight of an alpha's presence filled the room before she even made a sound. I turned around, the oven mitts still on my hands. Harper was standing in the doorway. She had discarded the tuxedo jacket and unfastened the first 3 buttons of her white silk shirt, revealing the smooth, toned expanse of her chest. Her sleeves were rolled up to her elbows, exposing the intricate, expensive watch on her wrist and the powerful lines of her forearms. She looked incredibly tired, but devastatingly beautiful in the dim, under-cabinet lighting. "I smelled vanilla," Harper murmured, her voice husky from exhaustion. "I couldn't sleep," I replied softly, setting the hot tray down on the marble island. "Baking helps me think. Do you want one? They're fresh." Harper walked slowly into the kitchen, the soft padding of her bare feet a stark contrast to her usual commanding stride. She stopped on the opposite side of the marble island, looking down at the tray of cookies, and then up at me in my baggy sweatpants and messy hair. "You look more beautiful right now than you did in that emerald silk," Harper said quietly, the raw honesty in her voice catching me completely off guard. I felt a furious blush creeping up my neck. I quickly grabbed a small plate, placed 2 warm cookies on it, and slid it across the cool marble toward her. She picked one up, taking a small bite. Her eyes fluttered shut for a second, a soft, involuntary hum escaping her throat. "God, that is incredible," she breathed out. "It's a secret recipe," I smiled tentatively, leaning against the counter. "So, do you want to tell me what happened in that limo? Because one second we were whatever we were doing and the next you completely shut me out." Harper set the half-eaten cookie down, the remnants of her smile vanishing. She stared at the marble countertop for a long time, the silence stretching between us until I thought she was simply going to walk away. "Lily's biological mother was a model," Harper finally spoke, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "We met at a gala much like the one tonight. I was younger, arrogant, and I thought I could simply buy the perfect family dynamic. When Lily was born, it was a media circus. Every magazine, every blog." Harper looked up, her stormy eyes dark with old pain. "She couldn't handle the pressure," Harper continued, her voice dropping to a bitter whisper. "The constant scrutiny, my work schedule, the demands of the board. When Lily was 8 months old, she packed her bags and asked for a payout. She signed away all her parental rights for $10 million and a penthouse in New York. She never looked back. My heart broke. I looked at the fierce, terrifying CEO and suddenly understood the towering, icy wall she had built around herself and her daughter. She wasn't just controlling, she was profoundly, deeply terrified of abandonment. I promised myself, Harper said, taking a slow step around the kitchen island, closing the distance between us, that I would never let anyone close enough to hurt Lily again. I built a fortress, controlled every variable. I swore I would never let another Omega into our lives. She stopped directly in front of me, entirely invading my personal space. The scent of cedar and bergamot wrapped around me, thick and heavy, but the aggressive edge was gone. It was just warm, pleading, and incredibly vulnerable. "And then you walked into my cafe," I whispered, finishing her thought. "No," Harper corrected, reaching out to gently cut my jaw. Her thumb brushed over my cheekbone, her touch impossibly soft. "Then my daughter ran into your arms. And you didn't care about my money. You didn't care about my title. You stood in front of me, covered in flour, and you fought for her." I leaned into her touch, completely unable to stop myself. My Omega instincts were singing, drawn to the wounded alpha who was finally baring her throat. "I'm not her," I promised softly, looking deep into her stormy gray eyes. "I don't care about the galas, Harper. I just care about the little girl upstairs. And maybe I care a little bit about her stubborn, infuriating mother, too." Harper let out a jagged, shuddering breath. Her eyes darkened with that familiar, possessive heat, but this time there were no cameras. There were no board members. There was only the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the sweet smell of vanilla. She stepped perfectly flush against me, trapping me between the cool marble counter and the burning heat of her body. Her free hand slid to the small of my back, pulling me impossibly close. "Tell me to stop, Emma," Harper whispered fiercely, her lips brushing against mine as she spoke, sending a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity straight down to my toes. "Tell me this is just a contract. Tell me to step back and I will. Because if you don't stop me right now, I am never going to let you go." End of Part 8. Part 9, The Omega's Defiance. "Tell me to stop, Emma." The words hung in the warm, vanilla-scented air of the kitchen, raw and vulnerable. Harper Hayes, the untouchable billionaire, the ruthless alpha who commanded boardrooms and destroyed rivals without a second thought, was standing in front of me, completely at my mercy. Her body was trembling slightly against mine, the sheer force of her restraint radiating from her like heat from a furnace. I looked up into those stormy gray eyes. Terrifying CEO mask was entirely gone, shattered into a million pieces. In its place was a woman who was desperately, entirely terrified of being left behind. I didn't step back. Instead, I slid my hands up the smooth silk of her open shirt, my fingertips trailing over her collarbones before tangling in the soft, dark hair at the nape of her neck. "I don't want you to stop," I whispered, my voice breathless and sure. "I'm not going anywhere, Harper." A ragged, heavy groan escaped Harper's throat. The last thread of her ironclad control snapped. She closed the agonizing fraction of an inch between us, crashing her lips down onto mine. It wasn't a gentle, hesitant first kiss. It was a collision. It was years of built-up walls completely collapsing. Harper's mouth was hot, demanding, and incredibly desperate, pouring every ounce of her unspoken fear and possessive alpha instinct into the kiss. I gasped against her lips, entirely overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of it, and she took immediate advantage, deepening the kiss until my knees buckled. Harper caught me instantly. Her strong arms wrapped around my waist, lifting me effortlessly until I was sitting on the edge of the cool marble island. She stepped exactly between my knees, pulling me flush against her chest. Contrast of the freezing marble beneath me and her burning heat pressing into me sent my senses into absolute overdrive. I wrapped my arms tightly around her neck, kissing her back with a fierce, answering hunger that surprised even me. The scent of sharp cedar, rain, and expensive bergamot entirely enveloped me, mixing intoxicatingly with the warm aroma of the chocolate chunk cookies cooling beside us. My Omega instincts sang, a deep, resonant vibration of pure rightness. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. When we finally pulled apart, we were both gasping for air. Harper rested her forehead against mine, her eyes closed, her chest heaving against my own. Her large hands were anchored to my hips, gripping me as if she was afraid I would vanish if she let go. "You," Harper breathed out, her voice a low, raspy vibration, "are going to be the absolute death of me, Emma." "I think you'll survive," I murmured, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to the corner of her mouth. Harper finally opened her eyes, the stormy gray now warm and liquid silver. A genuine, breathtakingly beautiful smile spread across her face, the first real smile I had ever seen her wear. Transformed her entirely, erasing the cold CEO and revealing a woman who was radiant, protective, and devastatingly charming. "Come to bed," Harper whispered, gently brushing a stray lock of chestnut hair behind my ear. "You need to sleep. And I need to know you're still here when I wake up." We didn't go to her massive master suite, and we didn't sleep in the same bed. Boundaries were still boundaries. But she walked me to my door, lingering in the hallway with a soft, final kiss that left my head spinning before retreating across the hall. The next morning, the dynamic in the sprawling estate had entirely shifted. When I brought Lily down for breakfast, Harper was actually at the table. She was dressed in a sharp slate gray suit, reading the Financial Times on her tablet, but the moment we walked in, her entire demeanor softened. "Mommy!" Lily shrieked happily, running toward Harper. To my absolute shock, Harper didn't flinch or correct her. She simply reached down, scooping the toddler into her arms and pressing a kiss to her dark hair. "Good morning, little one. Did you sleep well?" "Aha!" Lily nodded before reaching out toward me. "Other mommy." "Sit." My heart did a massive, tumbling flip in my chest. "Other mommy." Harper caught my eye over Lily's head. Possessive, warm heat in her gaze was unmistakable. She pulled out the chair next to hers, a silent, unmistakable invitation. I sat down, my face flushing as her hand casually found mine under the mahogany table, intertwining our fingers. The domestic bliss, however, was violently short-lived. Harper's phone rang sharply, cutting through the peaceful morning. She answered it, and I watched the warm, affectionate mother vanish in a matter of seconds, replaced by the ruthless CEO. Her jaw tightened, her eyes turning back into freezing, impenetrable storms. "I don't care what the legal team says," Harper snapped into the phone. "Block it." "I am on my way." She hung up, tossing the phone onto the table. "What's wrong?" I asked, my protective instincts instantly flaring. "The stunt at the gala last night," Harper said, standing up and adjusting her blazer, the tension radiating from her in waves. "Richard called an emergency board meeting. He is using the leaked photos and the paparazzi altercation to claim I am emotionally unstable and unfit to lead Hayes International. He is trying to force a vote of no confidence." My blood ran cold. Because of me? Because of the kiss? "Because he is a parasite looking for an excuse to steal my company," Harper corrected firmly. She leaned down, pressing a hard, reassuring kiss to my lips, completely ignoring the shocked gasp of a passing maid. "Stay here today, Emma. The estate is secure. Do not leave the grounds." "Harper, wait." But she was already gone, her bodyguards flanking her as she marched out the front door, leaving me sitting in the cavernous dining room with a terrifying sense of dread settling in my stomach. I couldn't just sit there. I wasn't a porcelain doll meant to be locked in a glass tower. By noon, the anxiety was clawing at my throat. I needed to do something. I needed my sanctuary. I called the head of security and demanded a car to take me to the daily grind. I figured if I was surrounded by Harper's massive bodyguards, I would be perfectly safe checking on my renovations. Cafe looked incredible. The new Italian espresso machine gleamed on the counter, and Chloe was practically crying tears of joy as she pulled shots. For a brief hour, surrounded by the smell of roasted coffee, I felt like myself again. But the bell above the door chimed and my heart plummeted. It wasn't a customer. It was Richard. He walked into my cafe looking entirely out of place in his bespoke suit, flanked by two men who looked suspiciously like corporate lawyers. His smug, condescending smile made my blood boil. "Get out," I said immediately, wiping my hands on my apron and stepping around the counter. "You are not welcome here." Now, Emma. "Let's not be hostile," Richard purred, looking around the renovated shop with a sneer of distaste. "I actually came to do you a favor. I brought some paperwork." One of the lawyers stepped forward, placing a thick manila folder on one of my cafe tables. "What is this?" I demanded, crossing my arms over my chest, refusing to step closer to him. "It's a non-disclosure agreement," Richard stated, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. "Along with a sworn affidavit stating that Harper Hayes paid you to act as a fake romantic partner and surrogate mother figure to improve her public image." "You're out of your mind if you think I'm signing that," I scoffed, glaring at him. "It's a complete lie." "Is it?" Richard challenged, stepping closer. He released a wave of his own alpha scent, bitter pine and cheap cologne. It was meant to intimidate me, to force my Omega instincts into submission, but compared to Harper's overwhelming, intoxicating presence, he just smelled rotten. I didn't even flinch. Richard frowned, annoyed by my lack of reaction. "Listen to me, you little baker. Harper is currently fighting a losing battle in that boardroom. If you sign this paper, I will personally guarantee that Hayes International completely forgives the debt on this cafe. You will own it free and clear forever. You can go back to your pathetic, quiet life. And if I don't?" I challenged, lifting my chin. "If you don't," Richard snarled, dropping the polite facade entirely, "I take over Hayes International today. And the first thing I will do as CEO is call in the debt on this property. Harper bypassed standard protocols to pay off your loan. There are loopholes. I will tie this building up in litigation for the next decade. I will seize your assets, freeze your accounts, and you will be out on the street by Friday." He tapped the folder on the table. "You have a choice, Emma. Save your little dream here, or go down on a sinking ship with a broken CEO who is just using you as a prop." Cafe was dead silent. Chloe was standing behind the counter, looking terrified. Two lawyers stared at me, waiting for me to break, waiting for the fragile Omega to burst into tears and sign her life away. I looked at the folder. I looked at the gleaming new espresso machine. I thought about the years of blood, sweat, and tears I had poured into this brick-walled sanctuary. It was my entire life. Then I thought about a little girl with stormy gray eyes calling me Mommy. I thought about the fierce, brilliant woman who had broken down her own walls just to taste vanilla on my lips. I walked over to the table. Richard smirked, holding out a sleek black pen. I didn't take the pen. I picked up the thick manila folder, looked Richard dead in the eyes, and ripped the documents cleanly in half. Richard's jaw dropped. "Are you insane?" "No," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I am just incredibly tired of mediocre alphas thinking they can bully me. You think you can use my business to destroy Harper? You don't know the first thing about either of us." I threw the torn papers at his chest. They scattered across the floor in a messy flutter of legal threats. "Chloe," I called back without turning around. "Lock the doors. Close up shop. Where are you going?" Chloe squeaked. I pulled off my apron, tossing it onto the counter. I looked back at Richard, a fierce, blazing defiance igniting in my chest. I wasn't just a baker anymore. I was an Omega who had claimed an alpha, and no one was going to threaten my family. "I'm going to Hayes International," I said coldly. "I'm going to a board meeting." End of Part 9. Part 10, The Alpha's Mate. The ride to Hayes International was a blur of adrenaline and pure, unadulterated Omega fury. I didn't care that I was wearing flour-dusted jeans and a faded t-shirt. I didn't care that I was about to march into a room full of the most powerful, intimidating executives in the Pacific Northwest. Richard had threatened my sanctuary, but more importantly, he had threatened my alpha. When the black SUV slammed to a halt in front of the towering glass monolith, I didn't wait for the bodyguards to open my door. I shoved it open myself, marching into the grand lobby with a singular, blinding focus. The security guards at the front desk saw me coming. One of them immediately reached for his radio, recognizing me from my previous dramatic entrance. "Ma'am, you cannot go up there," he started, stepping into my path. "Stand down," a deep voice rumbled from behind me. I glanced over my shoulder to see Marcus, the massive head of Harper's personal security detail. He had followed me from the cafe. He looked at the lobby guard with a stone-cold expression. "She is with me. And if you try to stop her, you'll be answering directly to Ms. Hayes. Do you really want to test that?" The lobby guard swallowed hard, immediately stepping aside. I rode the glass elevator to the top floor, my heart hammering a frantic, echoing rhythm against my ribs. When the doors slid open, the executive floor was eerily quiet. The receptionist's desk was empty. I marched directly toward the heavy, frosted glass doors of the primary boardroom. I could hear voices echoing from within, loud, aggressive, and entirely hostile. "Her erratic behavior is a liability to this entire corporation." Richard's voice boomed through the glass. "Bringing a civilian into a highly classified charity event, allowing herself to be photographed in a compromising position, it screams of instability. We need leadership that prioritizes the shareholders, not personal, scandalous indiscretions." I slammed my hands against the heavy doors and pushed them wide open. The heavy thud of the doors hitting the wall echoed like a gunshot in the massive boardroom. 20 high-backed leather chairs were occupied by the board of directors. At the head of the long mahogany table stood Harper. She was wearing a razor-sharp midnight black suit, her posture rigid, her stormy gray eyes practically vibrating with suppressed alpha rage. The air in the room was suffocating, thick with the scent of aggressive, warring pheromones. But the moment the doors opened and I stepped into the room, Harper's head snapped toward me. The entire boardroom went dead silent. 20 pairs of eyes stared at the flour-dusted, furious Omega standing in the doorway. "Emma," Harper breathed out, the lethal tension in her shoulders breaking for a fraction of a second. The suffocating scent of burnt ozone in the room immediately shifted, spiked with the deep, intoxicating aroma of cedar and rain. She took a step toward me, but I held up a hand, stopping her. I wasn't here to be protected. I was here to fight. "Security," Richard shouted, his face turning an ugly shade of puce as he recognized me. "How did this woman get in here? Have her removed instantly. If anyone touches her, they will leave this building in a body bag," Harper snarled, her voice dropping to a terrifying primal register that made half the board members physically flinch in their seats. I ignored all of them. I walked straight past the millionaires and billionaires, my worn sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished marble floor, until I was standing directly across the table from Richard. "You left something at my cafe, Richard," I said, my voice eerily calm, carrying clearly across the silent room. I reached into the pocket of my jeans and pulled out the torn halves of the non-disclosure agreement, slamming them down onto the pristine mahogany table. "What is the meaning of this?" an older woman with silver hair demanded, peering at the torn documents. "That," I said, pointing a shaking finger at Richard, "is an extortion attempt." Less than 30 minutes ago, Richard walked into my private business with 2 corporate lawyers. He explicitly threatened to tie my property up in litigation, freeze my assets, and bankrupt me if I didn't sign a sworn affidavit lying about Harper's mental state. A collective gasp rippled through the boardroom. Murmurs erupted violently among the directors. Extortion and corporate sabotage were not just frowned upon, they were highly illegal. Richard's smug facade entirely shattered. "She's lying. She's a hysterical Omega trying to protect her sugar mommy. I have never been to her pathetic little bakery. Check the security footage, I challenged, staring him down with absolute blazing defiance. My cafe has cameras covering every inch of the floor. You're on tape threatening me, Richard. Your lawyers are on tape. And my barista recorded the entire audio on her phone while she was hiding behind the espresso machine you just called pathetic. The blood completely drained from Richard's face. He opened his mouth, stammering, looking frantically around the table for allies, but the directors were already pulling away from him in absolute disgust. I turned my back on him, entirely dismissing his existence, and looked at Harper. She was staring at me as if I had just pulled the moon down from the sky and placed it in her hands. The raw, burning awe in her stormy gray eyes stole the breath right out of my lungs. Harper slowly stepped forward, her expensive heels clicking against the marble until she was standing right in front of me, completely ignoring the stunned board of directors. She reached out, her large, warm hands gently gripping my waist. "You came here," Harper whispered, her voice husky, meant entirely for me. "He threatened your business, your life's work, and instead of taking his deal, you came into a room full of hostile alphas to defend me." "I told you," I murmured, my Omega instincts purring, entirely intoxicated by her overwhelming protective scent. "I don't run. Not from you. And certainly not from mediocre bullies." Harper let out a jagged breath, her eyes darkening with a possessive heat that practically scorched my skin. She turned her head, fixing Richard with a look of such absolute terrifying destruction that the man physically took a step back. "Marcus," Harper commanded smoothly. The massive bodyguard stepped into the boardroom. "Yes, Ms. Hayes. Contact the legal department. Have them file charges against Richard for corporate espionage, extortion, and harassment. Then have security escort him off the premises. If he resists, feel free to use necessary force." Harper turned her gaze to the rest of the silent, wide-eyed board members. Furthermore, Richard's shares in Hayes International are completely frozen, pending a full federal investigation. Are there any further questions regarding my stability to lead this company? No one dared to breathe, let alone speak. The silver-haired woman finally cleared her throat. "No, Miss Hayes. I believe the matter is entirely settled. We will convene next week to discuss the fallout of Richard's actions." "Excellent," Harper said, her tone dripping with ice. "Meeting adjourned. Get out of my boardroom." Within 2 minutes, the room was completely empty. The heavy frosted doors clicked shut, leaving just the two of us alone in the sprawling, glass-walled space. The moment the doors closed, Harper's icy composure completely shattered. She surged forward, wrapping her arms around me and lifting me clean off my feet. I gasped, tangling my fingers in her perfectly styled dark hair as she buried her face in the crook of my neck. She breathed in deeply, pulling my scent into her lungs, a heavy, desperate rumble vibrating in her chest. "You magnificent, terrifying, beautiful Omega," Harper groaned against my skin, pressing hot, desperate kisses along my jawline. "Do you have any idea what you just did to me? Watching you stand there and tear him apart. I have never been so entirely obsessed with a human being in my entire life." "I think you were already a little obsessed with me, Hayes," I teased breathlessly, wrapping my legs around her waist as she carried me backward, pressing my back against the cool glass of the boardroom window. "Completely," Harper confessed, pulling back just enough to look into my eyes. The silver storms in her gaze were completely unguarded, filled with an overwhelming, consuming love. "The 3-month contract is void, Emma. I am terminating it right now." My heart skipped a painful beat, a sudden spike of fear piercing through the adrenaline. "What?" "Because 3 months isn't enough," Harper whispered fiercely, her thumbs gently tracing my cheekbones. 3 years isn't enough. I want you in my house, I want you in my bed, and I want you in Lily's life. Forever. I want to wake up to the smell of vanilla and roasted coffee every single morning for the rest of my life. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. The walls of the golden cage had vanished, leaving only a home. "Harper." I love you, Harper said, the words slipping out of her with absolute terrifying certainty. It was a vow. A prime alpha claiming her mate. I know I am demanding and arrogant and entirely too much to handle. But I will spend every single day making sure you and that bakery have everything you could ever dream of if you just promise to stay. I looked at the ruthless billionaire who had terrified me just a week ago and realized I had never felt safer in my entire life. I love you too, I whispered, smiling through my tears. But you're still not allowed to mess with my espresso machines without asking. Harper let out a booming, genuine laugh, the sound bright and echoing in the massive room. Deal. She leaned in, capturing my lips in a kiss that was slow, deep, and completely devoted. There were no cameras, no board members, and no secrets. It was just the two of us, high above the Seattle skyline, sealing a promise that neither of us would ever break. 3 months later. The bell above the door of the Daily Grind chimed, a cheerful, familiar sound. Iced oat milk latte for Sarah, Chloe called out, sliding the cup across the polished counter. I wiped my hands on my apron, smiling as the morning rush finally began to slow down. Cafe was thriving, completely debt-free and full of loyal customers. But my favorite customer was currently sitting in the corner booth. Harper was dressed in a soft, casual cashmere sweater, a massive departure from her rigid corporate suits, with her laptop open on the table. But she wasn't looking at the screen. She was smiling, watching Lily completely cover a piece of scratch paper with chaotic crayon drawings. I walked over, carrying a plate of fresh chocolate chunk cookies. "Mommy!" Lily cheered, dropping her crayon and reaching up. I scooped the toddler into my arms, pressing a kiss to her dark hair before sliding into the booth next to Harper. Harper immediately wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me flush against her side, completely uncaring of the public space. Her scent, cedar, rain, and absolute contentment wrapped around me like a warm blanket. "How is the takeover of the European market going?" I asked, stealing a sip of Harper's black coffee. "Boring," Harper murmured, leaning over to press a soft, lingering kiss to my temple. "I would much rather be right here." I smiled, leaning my head on her shoulder as Lily happily munched on a cookie. I looked around my bustling cafe, feeling the solid, unshakable presence of the alpha beside me and the warm, happy child in my lap. I had accidentally spilled coffee on a billionaire and somehow I had built the perfect family. And as Harper's hand gently squeezed mine under the table, I knew without a single doubt that this was my forever. End of story. Wow, what an absolute journey. Welcome back to reality, everyone. You are listening to your GL girlfriend, and I don't know about you, but I am still trying to catch my breath after that intense roller coaster of a story. Let's just take a moment to unpack everything that just happened between Emma and Harper because, oh my goodness, the tension was completely off the charts. We started with what seemed like a classic setup, the cold, untouchable billionaire alpha and the warm, hardworking Omega baker. But it evolved into something so much deeper and more powerful, didn't it? What I absolutely adored about this dynamic was Emma's fierce defiance. She was never just a damsel in distress waiting to be saved by Harper's endless bank account. In fact, she actively fought against it. She demanded respect. When Richard tried to ruin her life and her cafe, Emma didn't cry in a corner or wait for Harper to rescue her. No, she marched directly into a hostile boardroom of alphas wearing flour-dusted jeans and absolutely tore him to shreds. She proved that Omega strength isn't about physical dominance. It's about fierce, unyielding protection of the people you love. And Harper, soft sigh/chuckle, seeing her terrifying, icy exterior slowly melt away was everything. Underneath all those expensive tailored suits and corporate threats, she was just a woman terrified of being abandoned again. That late-night kitchen scene? Contrast between her overwhelming alpha presence and the sweet smell of vanilla cookies? Pure magic. Little Lily was the perfect bridge between their two completely opposite worlds, accidentally building the perfect family just by following her heart and finding her other mommy. But enough about what I think, I want to hear from you. Let's get a conversation going down below. I have 3 questions for you today. First, which scene was your absolute favorite? Was it the intense standoff at the charity gala when Emma put Richard in his place while wearing that stunning emerald silk dress? Or maybe the sweet, domestic moments with little Lily? Second, if you were in Emma's shoes, staring down that multi-million-dollar NDA in your cafe, would you have ripped it up or would you have been too terrified of the board? Be completely honest. And finally, what kind of GL trope do you want to hear next on the channel? Enemies to lovers? Best friends to lovers? Let me know. If you enjoyed this story and felt your heart flutter even just a little bit, please do me a massive favor and hit that like button. Takes 1 second, but it helps the channel out more than you could ever imagine. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to your GL girlfriend and turn on those notification bells. I have so many more amazing, intense, and romantic girls' love stories lined up for you, and I promise you will not want to miss a single one. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today and letting me share this beautiful world with you. Your support means absolutely everything to me. If you are a true fan and made it all the way to the very end of this video, leave a coffee emoji in the comments so I know who my dedicated listeners are. Until next time, stay sweet, stay fierce, and keep loving GL. Bye for now.